1. This happened not today but many a year ago. When I was young, my family lived very close to my maternal grandparents. Their house was just 2 blocks away, and a couple times a week, my mother would walk over with my brother and me around lunchtime. We would all have lunch together. Then my mom and grandmom would sit in the kitchen playing cards and talking while I played with my brother in the living room. One day my brother and I were busy building a Lego city after lunch, and the grown-ups decided to put their card game on hold to watch their favorite soap opera on the living room TV. My mother shooed us out, telling us to go play in the kitchen for a while and have a snack. There was a bowl of potato chips and some soda on the table, so we sat down, ate our snack, and played Go Fish with the deck of cards. After a while, the soap was about to end, and my brother and I were getting bored. So we decided to head back out to the living room. Bro ran out, and as I was leaving the kitchen, I saw a little forgotten-looking chocolate bar on the counter. It was a segmented chocolate bar, partially wrapped in its foil paper, and there were only a couple of sections missing. Score! Being the sneaky little shit I was, I quickly pocketed it and headed back out to the Lego mess. My brother and I created blocky multicolored worlds for a while. Then I excused myself to the bathroom to eat my ill-gotten candy in secrecy, because I was greedy as well as sneaky. It tasted a little dry and stale, but chocolate is chocolate. And I was an 8-year-old kid, so it's all good. I squished up the empty foil wrapper, flushed it, and went back out to play. Shortly after, my wonderful and loving grandmother came out and sweetly asked us if we took some candy that she left on the counter. Of course, we both denied it, and looked up at her with our big, innocent child eyes. Then she got serious. She placed her fists on her hips, looked sternly down on us, and said, "I know it was on the counter this morning. Somebody took it, and I think it was one of you kids. If either of you took it, I want you to be honest and tell me now. I will be angry, but you should not lie to your grandmother." We both gave her innocent blank stares. Grandmom pointed her finger at us. "One of you is lying. I don't know who, and I'm done asking. But know this. God will punish whichever one of you stole that chocolate and then lied about it. When that happens, I will know it was you. So this is your last chance to tell the truth." More innocent stares and claims of innocence. She turned and went back to her card game in the kitchen without another word. I wasn't overly worried. My grandmother had a flair for theatrics, and, as far as I was concerned, I had committed the perfect crime. Let them suspect me. They had no evidence, so ha-ha! I'd again like to point out that I was a horrible little shit. I assured my little brother that I didn't take it, and we went back to our Lego pile. About 20 to 30 minutes later, I began to feel a little off. Nothing especially worrying, just some gurgling and rumbling in my gut, like I was gassy, only without the actual gas. I tried to ignore it. Shortly after, I felt like I needed to poop. Still nothing to freak out over. It steadily and swiftly got worse. Very swiftly. After a few more minutes, there was a massive clenching in my lower gut. I broke out in a cold sweat, and I had to get out of there immediately. So I dropped everything and sprinted to the upstairs bathroom. I barely had time to drop my pants and sit before my ass full-on detonated. The cramping was horrible. Each stomach cramp was immediately followed by a high-pressure, gritty liquid explosion. My ass had become hell's fire hose, and there was no sign of when it would stop. After what seemed like forever, my digestive tract was finally empty, and I sat there dazed and exhausted. I was shaking and too weak to even get up from the toilet. There was a knock on the door. Then my grandmother peeked in and asked if I was okay. I told her I had a stomachache and was sick. Her chilling response, "This is the punishment I told you about. You should have told me the truth when you had the chance. You were able to lie to me, but God knows the truth. I want an apology, but I'm not going to punish you. I think you suffered enough." Years later, this story came up in conversation. I asked my grandmother, who was not at all religious, how she was so sure that God would punish me. Her answer, "It was a bar of X-Lax." 2. Obligatory, this happened several years ago, because it did. This was when I was 12. I can't exactly remember, but it was when I was at my parents' old house, the rental house. Also, the title fuck-up is one of many small, dumb decisions that added up to something I wasn't able to live down for years. So, 12-year-old me was a troublesome kid. I had already begun to rebel against authority. Punk rock skateboard phase by the end of that year. Mostly I hung out with older, cooler kids and listened to a lot of Blink-182. This has nothing to do with the FU except that suddenly I am bringing home lots of mixtapes. Borrowed CDs from the used record store that was like a second home to me over the next few years. Music that my parents, but especially my mother, despised. The horrors of Blink-182 and their devil music with that parental advisory sticker on the cover. "Oh God, it's awful," etc. Religious parents. They're real fun. I love my parents and we laugh about this kind of thing nowadays. But back then it was serious business. My mom had the habit of removing things in the house she did not like. This included pop-punk albums that I thought were super edgy and cool, just because there were some F-bombs sprinkled in. My upstairs bedroom had several great hiding places, but somehow I found at least 15 of my CDs disappeared over a 6-month period. And there was nothing I could do about it. For half of the day when I was at school, my shit was defenseless. It's not like I could lock my mom out of my room in a house that I didn't own or pay rent in to keep her from throwing my stuff away. Or could I? It was always under the excuse of cleaning that she would go into my room, and I figured it out quickly because I wasn't the kind of kid that kept a messy room. Even at 12, I was a clean freak. There was no reason for her to go in there except to snoop around and throw away my stuff. So I took immediate action. Keep in mind that this was an older house with those round brass knobs on the interior doors. They could be locked on the inside with a little push button. And they had no keyhole on the outside, just a pinhole. Probably to pick the lock in emergencies. One day, I did some garage digging and found an old knob. One that was on the front door and got replaced when my dad upgraded the lock and deadbolt to a more sturdy one. This one looked nearly identical to the interior knobs, except for the obvious keyhole on the outside. I got out the old screwdriver and installed it, congratulating myself for my handiwork. Problem solved, right? My bedroom door was as secure as could be. I had the keys. I could hide all kinds of shit in there, and there was nothing my uptight parents could do about it. Now to the morning of the fuck-up. When I installed the new knob, I made sure to pocket the keys and test them first. The knob worked like a charm. All I had to do when I left was lock it. New knob had a switch to lock it from the inside like the old ones did, and the switch was, let's say, a little loose from the probably 10 years of use it had experienced on the front door of the house. Easy to flick by mistake or overlook. Like a dumbass, I locked the door from the inside when I went to bed that night. Safe in my little fortress, right? Right. This is mid-November, cold as hell, both inside and outside of the house. I wore my bathrobe downstairs the next morning. Bathrobe, not pants. This was a Friday morning, a school morning. and a morning when my dad was at work, he left at 5:30 on the dot every day, and my mom worked morning shifts at her job. It is approximately 6 in the morning. My alarm would ring at 6:30. For whatever reason, I was up early that day and went downstairs in my bathrobe and slippers to make breakfast. Eggo waffles and shit. I'm downstairs in the kitchen, stuffing waffles in my face, when my alarm clock rings. I forgot to shut it off when I got up. It's a loud one. An ear-splitting alarm is needed to drag me from my bed every morning. Mouth full of Eggo, I race back upstairs to shut the alarm clock off. My door is locked. Cue the sinking feeling, akin to locking your keys in your car, but instead of your car. It's a room, with a locked knob, and the fucking key is on the other side of the door. In the pants I wore the other day, when I installed it. The thing is ringing like a goddamn fire alarm, and the only way is through the door. Besides kicking the door down, I did the only thing I knew how. I raced outside to the backyard and climbed my way up to the window. There is 3 inches of snow on the ground. To reach my bedroom window, I have to climb a 6-foot wooden fence, perch on the railing, and ninja jump about 1.5 feet onto the roof, and walk across a roof that is now slick with snow, in fucking slippers and a bathrobe. Needless to say, my first attempt leaves me on my ass in the snow. I fucking slid off the fence and smacked my head on pretty hard ground. Enough to wind me for at least a minute or two. By this point I'm shitting myself. My mom will be home in less than an hour from work. And it's a school day, and I have to be out the door and ready by 7:30. I try again, and somehow manage not to break my neck and die. Balancing like a cat on the railing about 3 inches wide, jumping onto the roof, climbing on all fours to my bedroom window, which, thank God, is unlocked, and will open enough to let me crawl through. So I crawl through, in my bathrobe with nothing on underneath. Anyone who happened to look at the rear of the house would have seen my bare ass sticking out the window as I struggled through. I shut off my alarm clock and got dressed and finished my breakfast, and went to school like nothing out of the ordinary had happened. I thought that would be the last of it. But someone did see. At some school event about a month later, the dad of one of the girls in my class, this girl lived on the opposite side of the neighborhood across from our yard, comes up to me. "Was that you I saw climbing through the window that one morning?" I can tell he's trying not to laugh, but pretty much failing. Fuck. This guy was friends with my dad and on the fire department with him. So I inevitably ran into him from time to time. And every time he saw me for a long time after that, it brought up my unfortunate experience with locked doors and bathrobes. 3. So I need to start with a bit of backstory and information about myself to set the scene before I get to the actual events of what happened. My body is an asshole and requires a ridiculous amount of fluids. I drink 4 to 6 32-ounce bottles of Powerade and or water daily. I buy Powerades, then reuse them as water bottles, frequently switching them out so they always sort of taste like the flavor that was in them, even if it's just water. I also always have multiple bottles going so I can keep a couple in the fridge, so I always have cold water. So this happened Thursday, and 2 weeks ago on Monday I had gone to see a movie, which I sneaked some grape Smirnoff vodka into a grape Powerade bottle. I did not finish said vodka. About 8 ounces remained in the bottle, a little over 5 shots, which sat in my room for over a week. On Wednesday, I filled up the 3 water bottles sitting in my room and put them in the fridge, forgetting that one of them was not water. To be fair, I was drinking beer at the time. The water bottle that I decided to keep near my bed for the morning happened to be that one. I woke up a bit hungover, so I still had the taste of alcohol on my breath. I'd like to add my work is an 8-minute drive from my house, and I shower at night, so I normally get up 20 to 30 minutes before my shift is scheduled to begin. So I wake up feeling like I had just been roaming through the desert for a couple days from a combination of my body naturally sucking and the hangover, and chug about 3/4 of the water bottle on my nightstand. When I was done with that, I set it down and, half asleep, think to myself, wow, this water bottle tastes more like grape than normal. So I go to the bathroom, come back to my room, light up a cig while getting dressed, polish off the last of my water, grab a couple new water bottles out the fridge and head to work. I've been up about 10 minutes at this point. Around the time I get to work, I'm thinking to myself, am I still drunk? Like, I know I had 6 beers yesterday and only slept 5 hours. But this seems a bit crazy. Now is a good time to point out that I work in a kitchen with a detached dish prep room in the basement, so I can listen to music while I'm down there doing those activities. I also have to interact with many other cooks, servers, etc., as they are down there a lot as well. Apparently, they noticed that I was rather intoxicated, as after only about 15 minutes of working, I was called into the office by my head chef and one of our owners. I had brought in a 2.1 speaker setup that is rather loud, so there I was minding my own business, slicing corned beef, blaring 45 by Shinedown, and singing, slurring along at the top of my lungs at 2:15 in the afternoon, when I was approached by the two of them. In my drunken, only having been awake for 35 minutes state, I had no idea what it was about. Upon entering the office and having the door shut behind them, the door never gets shut, I'm like, oh no. Like time seemed to slow down. That may have just been the booze. My chef asks, really? You're gonna come to work this drunk? I say, I am not drunk. I think I'm just hungover. The owner replies, you reek of vodka. About 10 seconds pass as the gears are clearly turning in my head, and they both stare at me, waiting for a response, when I suddenly exclaim in a clearly agitated tone, oh my god, the fucking vodka! I do a facepalm, rubbing action, and sigh deeply. Now I have 2 extremely bewildered looking bosses staring at me. And because I was so focused on my own stupidity, it wasn't until later that I realized what must have been going through their heads. Probably something along the lines of, does this dude really not know that drinking a bunch of vodka will get you drunk? I explained what happened, see above, to them, and they have a very skeptical reaction. I had Friday off as it was, so they sent me home and told me that they would call me and tell me if I should bother coming in on Saturday. Fortunately, on Friday I received a call saying to come in but never let that happen again. On Saturday I'm told by my head chef that that story was so ridiculous it seems impossible to make up, or if I did make it up on the spot, he's impressed, but I will be fired if it happens again. I accept that, and from now on will not be keeping alcohol in my normal water containers. Edit. I'm not proud of it, but that doesn't make it untrue. I got 2 DUIs by the time I was 23, plus I admitted to the doctor I occasionally use drugs, recreationally many years ago. I've been trying to figure out what's wrong with me for 3+ years now. I'm 30. But all they ever want to do is check my liver over and over again. And when it's basically fine, they pass it off as me trying to score drugs, so I'm not sure what's going on. I do have a genetic history of diabetes, and also my kidneys sometimes hurt, but they don't seem to care. I've been thinking of switching doctors, but they would require traveling much further away. Edit 2. Thank you everyone concerned for my health. I drink much more water than Powerade, probably 12 to 20 bottles of water per Powerade bottle, so rest assured, I'm okay on that aspect. Since you are all so concerned though, anyone with any insight should PM me with info on hiatal hernias and internal hernias of the intestines, because apparently I have those according to ER doctors, who were the only ones to take me seriously when I went about 2 years ago. They did CT scans and found those. Not sure if that has anything to do with my water intake, but cold water does feel great. This is turning into a weird post. 4. When I was in high school, I wanted to try mushrooms really bad. My first attempt at buying them, I purchased a small amount because I didn't know what to expect. Well, nothing happened, and I was bummed out. My second attempt, I made sure to purchase enough to really mess me up. But after taking them and waiting up all night, I realized they were a bunk batch and had no effect. Well, third try is the charm, right? Correct? I made sure the source I was buying them from was a credible one, and I made sure to buy plenty of them for my friend Jay and I. So we bought 3/4 ounces. So here is the setting. We're in my garage, which has a couch big enough to seat 4 people, and the sun is about to go down in 30 minutes or so. I am with my girlfriend, and Jay is with his. Jay and I split up the shrooms so we have 1.5 quarters each. Our girlfriends are smart ones and do not want to participate in this particular activity with us. And Jay and I eat all the mushrooms in one giant mouthful to get the fullest effect. They taste like cow shit, and since I put so much in my mouth at once, they just sat there and marinated in my taste buds for a half hour until I could finally swallow it all. So everything starts out great. It's been about 30 minutes and the mushrooms are kicking in, and all 4 of us are sitting on the couch, and Jay and I get the giggles really bad. I was making everybody laugh so hard like I was this great comedian, but I'm still not sure if I was even funny or if they were just laughing at me. At some point, all of us end up switching seats so that Jay and I are sitting next to each other, and our girlfriends are sitting next to each other. And then I turn to Jay and say, "Dude, I'm not feeling good." Jay asks, "Are you sick?" And I say, "No, I just don't like this place anymore. It's scaring me and making me feel really uncomfortable." And then he says, "Oh yeah, man, me too." I'm pretty sure he was just really high and tripping because everything I saw, he said he saw too, and everything I felt, he miraculously felt as well. So I grab a blanket from behind me and throw it over my head so I'm covered like a tent, and immediately feel so much better that I let out a sigh of relief and say, "Oh my god, that is so much better." Then Jay says, "Let me under there, man." And he joins me under the blanket, completely isolating our girlfriends by this point. They don't care anyways, they stopped paying attention to us a long time ago, and were just chatting amongst themselves while we tripped our balls off. They must have left the garage at some point because me and Jay spent the next couple of hours under that blanket on my couch, with our knees up to our chest, sitting there side by side in the darkness of the blanket. It was crazy because the light in my garage was shining through the small holes in the blanket, which to us looked like a star-filled night sky. We totally lost ourselves in our own world. I had completely forgotten about life outside of this blanket. I had forgotten that I was under a blanket at all. I didn't know or care where I was, because Jay and I were completely invested in a conversation about outer space, and the possibilities of alien life out there, and the meaning of existence, and godlike spirits, among other theoretical mindfuck thought processes. Suddenly, I think to myself that I completely forgot where I was. I asked Jay, "Dude, I can't remember where we are." He said, "We're under a blanket, dude." I said, "I know that, but where are we under a blanket?" Then he sat there in silence for a minute and said, "Dude, I don't know." I said, "Let's try to figure out where we are without peeking outside of the blanket." So we tried and tried, but ended up giving up and took off the blanket to see my garage. And we both were like, "Oh, we're in the garage. How could we forget?" I looked around and noticed our girlfriends were missing, and wondered how long we had been under that blanket, giggling to each other like a couple of schoolgirls, when I felt a sudden, intense rumbling in my stomach, and all the fun and laughter came to a screeching halt. I knew instantly that I was going to puke, so I searched frantically for a container to barf into, without moving because I was still too terrified to get up from the couch. I saw the tall garbage can sitting next to the couch and grabbed it, then started hurling my insides out into it. I gripped onto the sides of this container for dear life, because the stomach convulsions were really heavy and painful, and with every heave into the bin, I saw literally gallons of vomit spewing from my mouth. I puked over and over and over again, and every time I did, gallons and gallons of vomit came splashing forth into the trash can. It was at that moment I thought to myself, "This cannot be happening. There's no fucking way I can possibly contain that much fluid inside my body. What the fuck is going on here?" So I quickly stood up and stumbled my way to the bathroom. I had tunnel vision the entire way. I could only see in about a 3-foot circle of vision on the ground as I walked with my head down through the hallways. I got into the bathroom, and my vision was so faded that I could not even see my reflection. And I couldn't feel anything either, but I thought my face may have been feeling warm. I turned on the sink and splashed some cold water on my face, and I could swear it felt like it had literally evaporated off my skin like steam. My face was in fact incredibly hot, and the second I splashed it with cold water, my vision came back and I felt much better. I decided to walk back into the garage to witness the carnage of vomit that I had casted into the trash container. But when I walked up to it and leaned it towards me to peer inside, I discovered that it was bone dry. I hadn't puked at all, literally not a drop. So I naturally started really freaking out. It sucked because I was just beginning to feel much better. But that was all out the window now. I went into a total panic, but instead of displaying my fear to my girlfriend and visitors, I didn't speak a word and briskly walked to my bedroom, where I laid on my bed and shut my eyes as tight as I could, abandoning my guests without an explanation. A few minutes later, my friend Jay walked into my room with his girlfriend to say goodbye, and that they decided they were just going to go home now, since the party was obviously over. So I apologized my ass off, but they assured me it was fine, and they were just ready to go home now. This is probably where the worst fuck-up happens. So let me just explain that I sleep in the nude. I always have. So before my friend and his girl left the room, he said, "Good night," to me, and I said, "Good night," in return. But then my instincts kicked in for some reason, and when the words "good night" echoed through my head, I instantly dropped my pants and underwear to the ground, exposing my cock and balls to my best friend and his girlfriend. He quickly wrapped his hands over his girlfriend's eyes and yelled, "Dude, what the fuck are you doing?" I said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. You said goodnight, and I started getting ready for bed." He said it's fine, and left my house. My last fuck-up of the night was laying in my bed, trying to sleep for the next 6 hours, with my eyes tightly closed while hallucinogenic visions raced through my mind and my eyes. I saw the weirdest shit, like a blob of putty that swirled around and slowly morphed into the face of my puppy dog, who then stuck his tongue out and slobbered around all silly. Then that morphed into a mathematical grid that stretched on forever, and then split into millions of directions and ended up transforming into a forest of colorful Dr. Seuss-looking trees and plant life. I can't remember the rest because I was desperately trying to think of absolutely nothing. But it was not working at all. I was miserable and terrified and just wanted it to stop. I finally fell asleep once morning came, and I slept through the whole day. My friend came back over later that night, without his girlfriend this time, to check on me and see how I was doing. I apologized profusely once again, but he wasn't mad, and everything was cool after that. 5. This happened a few years ago. I was renting an apartment on my own then. It was a new building. My previous apartment was a beautiful historic structure that was bought by a hotel chain, so all of us had to move, filled with new equipment and furniture. I was feeling lonely on the 4th of July, since I had just been moved to the edge of town and was stuck with the bus at the time. Fireworks were against policy and probably city code, so it was quiet, but I wanted to have a little holiday fun. What I did was almost beautiful in its simple stupidity. No context or excuse can redeem me of my own idiocy. I had a bunch of big old bundled firecrackers sitting around, waiting for a lapse of judgment. I can't light it outside, so why not in my own private quarters? Something in me said that the smoke would be my biggest problem. So I went to my stove, lit a firecracker, and sealed it into a mason jar. A basic understanding of thermodynamics, or physics, or even common sense would have told me what a foolish move that was. Needless to say, the jar instantaneously filled with smoke and light, and my eyes widened in the cold realization of what I'd done. Before I could think to react, the jar erupted apart in a thunderous, shattering explosion, while the lit firecracker belched ash and detritus into my new kitchen. The aftermath was severe. Feigned concern when my neighbors knocked on my door kept me from being punished for my crime. But I spent the next week scrubbing soot from all around my stove countertops and hardwood floors, picking tiny pieces of glass from every corner, and nursing itchy scratches on my forearm. I wish I could say that this is further in my past, but it is not. I was a grown man who absolutely failed at common sense, and the lesson I learned is fresh and poignant. I'm just glad the consequence was work instead of life without a finger. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Embarrassing Stories, episode 19. Holy butts, this was a difficult one to put together. I had my 4 stories well in advance, and I'd sent out messages to get the last one I needed, and I woke up the day of recording, and some kind person had told me, yes, absolutely, you can use my story. So I went to save it, and it was gone, because I don't like to save the stories before I have permission, so I don't get muddled up and use ones I shouldn't be using. And I then was like, oh crap, I'll have to scramble to find another story. So I sent a few more messages out, and again, one other kind soul messaged me back, and I swear to God, in the amount of time, it was like an hour or two the story had been posted, so it wasn't that long before they responded to me. I went and I was about to save the story, and their story, like the previous one, had been removed. So thank you very much to the misguided fellow with the mason jar for being very kind and letting me use your story at the last minute. You actually saved the video. You know, is it just me, or have mason jars become inexplicably popular in the last year or so? Maybe the last couple of years. I'm noticing a lot of local stores that never seemed to have them before. They're everywhere now. I mean, as we speak, I've actually got 2 of the bloody things sitting on my desk, because I'm a lazy sod and I forgot to take the one that was empty downstairs. It's those ones with the metal lids and the straws in the top of them. And they're actually very good, because it holds a full can of Rockstar, or a full bottle of Arizona iced tea, which is great, but where did they come from all of a sudden? It certainly wasn't a UK thing before. Maybe it's just something that crept over from America. They're certainly a lot better than the kind of the coloured plastic smoothie cups I was using. Hold them at the same volume. So, yeah. Mason jars. Who knew? Okay, and with that, I think I'm going to head up. So, until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.